I never imagined that one simple moment in the kitchen could change everything. It was just another quiet evening. Dinner was almost ready, and I was setting the table when my stepson walked in. His eyes held something different that night, something unreadable. At first, I thought it was just a casual conversation, but then he hesitated, his fingers tapping lightly against the countertop. "Can you help me with something?" he asked, his voice softer than usual. There was a strange tension in the air, one I couldn't quite place. I turned to him, waiting, my heart picking up speed for reasons I couldn't explain. He took a slow step closer, the warm glow of the kitchen lights casting shadows over his face. "It's just, I don't know how to say this," he murmured. My stomach tightened. There was something about his tone, something that made my pulse quicken. I forced a smile, trying to lighten the mood. "Come on, just say it. I don't bite," I teased, hoping to break whatever awkwardness hung between us. But he didn't laugh. Instead, he looked straight at me, his expression filled with hesitation. And then, in the most unexpected way, he said something that made my breath catch, something that left me frozen, unsure of how to respond. At that moment, the air felt heavier, the space between us growing smaller. A decision had to be made, and whatever happened next would change everything. I stared at him, my mind racing. The way he looked at me, nervous yet determined, sent a strange chill down my spine. The kitchen suddenly felt smaller, the soft hum of the refrigerator, the only sound filling the silence between us. "What do you mean?" I finally asked, my voice quieter than I intended. He ran a hand through his hair, exhaling sharply. I I don't know how else to say it. It's been on my mind for a while now." His words trailed off, leaving me even more confused. I folded my arms, trying to steady my breath. "You're acting strange. Just tell me what's going on." For a moment he hesitated, like he was second-guessing himself. His fingers gripped the edge of the counter, knuckles turning white. Then, finally, he spoke. "I think about things I shouldn't," he admitted. His eyes met mine, and I felt a strange weight settle in my chest. There was something deeper here, something unspoken, but before I could press further, the sound of the front door opening shattered the moment. I stepped back instinctively, my heart hammering. My husband was home. The familiar clinking of keys on the table, the shuffle of his shoes against the floor. It was enough to remind me of reality, of the boundaries that suddenly felt blurred. My stepson exhaled sharply, rubbing the back of his neck. "Forget it," he muttered under his breath before quickly turning away. I stood there, frozen, as my husband walked into the kitchen, smiling like nothing had happened. "Smells good in here," he said, pressing a kiss to my cheek. "Long day at work? You okay?" I forced a nod, hoping he wouldn't notice the way my hands trembled. "Yeah, just tired," I lied. Across the room, my stepson glanced at me one last time before disappearing down the hallway. But I knew this wasn't over. Whatever he wanted to say, whatever had been lingering in his mind, was still there, waiting. And deep down, I wasn't sure if I wanted to know the answer. But what exactly did he ask? And how did I respond? Well, that's where the story really begins. Dinner felt like an eternity. My husband sat at the table, talking about his day, completely unaware of the tension lingering in the air. I nodded and smiled at all the right moments, but my mind was elsewhere. Across the table, my stepson barely touched his food. His eyes would flicker to mine now and then, like he was waiting for something, for me to acknowledge what had just happened in the kitchen. I couldn't. The weight of his unfinished words pressed on my chest, making it hard to breathe. What had he meant? What had he been about to say before my husband walked in? A part of me wanted to push it aside, to pretend it was nothing, but the look in his eyes told me otherwise. After dinner, my husband retreated to his office, lost in work as always. That left me alone in the kitchen, cleaning up in silence, my thoughts louder than ever. I was rinsing a plate when I felt a presence behind me. "You're avoiding me," My stepson's voice was quiet but firm. I gripped the plate a little tighter before setting it down. I don't know what you're talking about, I said, keeping my back to him. Yes, you do. I turned slowly, meeting his gaze. His expression was unreadable, somewhere between frustration and something else, something deeper. You said you think about things you shouldn't, I whispered, my voice barely above a breath. What did you mean? He hesitated, his jaw tightening. You already know. I felt a lump form in my throat. No, I didn't want to know. I couldn't know. But at the same time, I couldn't ignore the way my heart raced, the way my body felt tense with something I didn't fully understand. This isn't right, I finally said, my voice shaking slightly. Whatever you're thinking, it has to stop. For a long moment, he didn't say anything. Then, with a small, bitter laugh, he shook his head. I knew you'd say that. He turned to leave, and I should have let him go. I should have walked away and pretended this conversation never happened. But instead, I found myself whispering, "Wait." He stopped. His back was to me, shoulders tense as if he was waiting for me to take back that single word. But I didn't. I couldn't. My pulse was hammering in my ears as I stepped forward, though I wasn't even sure why. Maybe it was the uncertainty in his eyes, the way his breath had caught just before he turned away. Maybe it was the unspoken words still hanging between us, heavy and impossible to ignore. He turned slowly, his expression unreadable. Why? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out at first. What was I doing? What was I trying to say? Every logical part of my mind screamed at me to end this conversation and walk away, but my feet stayed rooted to the floor. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to meet his gaze. I don't want things to be weird between us. A bitter smile touched his lips. It's too late for that, don't you think? He wasn't wrong. Whatever this was, whatever line we had been towing, it had already blurred beyond recognition. A noise from down the hall made me take a step back. My husband's voice, muffled behind his office door, snapped me back to reality. What was I doing standing here, caught in this moment that should have never happened? I forced a deep breath and shook my head. This conversation is over. But even as I said it, I knew neither of us truly believed it. For the next few days, I tried to keep my distance. I buried myself in routines, in household chores, in meaningless distractions. But no matter how much space I put between us, I could still feel his presence, watching, waiting. Then, one evening, just as I thought I had regained some sense of normalcy, it happened. I was in the kitchen again, cleaning up after dinner. My husband had gone out to meet a friend, leaving the house unusually quiet. I had just turned off the faucet when I heard footsteps behind me. I didn't have to turn around to know who it was. You're avoiding me again, he said, his tone softer this time. I exhaled, gripping the edge of the sink. We need to let this go. Silence stretched between us, thick with unspoken words. Then suddenly he stepped closer, too close. My breath caught as I felt the warmth of his presence just inches away. Tell me you don't feel it, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I turned to face him, my heart pounding so hard it felt impossible to ignore. And that was when we heard it. The front door opening. My husband was home. Panic shot through me like a bolt of electricity. I took a sharp step back, creating distance, just as the sound of keys clinking against the table echoed through the house. My husband was home earlier than expected. My mind raced, scrambling for normalcy, for anything that wouldn't make this moment feel as dangerous as it suddenly was. My stepson didn't move at first. His eyes stayed locked on mine, searching for something, maybe hesitation, maybe regret. I didn't know what he saw, but after a beat, he took a slow step back, slipping into his usual composed expression. The moment shattered like glass, and I turned away, forcing myself to look busy, my hands shaking slightly as I wiped down the counter. Hey, everything okay in here? My husband's voice was casual, oblivious, but I felt the weight of his presence like a warning. I forced a smile, turning to face him. Yeah, just cleaning up. You're back early. He nodded, setting his phone down. Plans changed. Thought I'd just call it a night. His gaze flickered between the two of us, his brow creasing slightly. What were you guys up to? My breath hitched for a fraction of a second, but I recovered quickly. Nothing, just talking, I said, waving a hand dismissively. My stepson didn't say anything. He only nodded, offering a half-hearted shrug. But there was something in his silence that made my stomach twist. For the rest of the evening, the air in the house felt heavier, though my husband didn't seem to notice. He sat in the living room, flipping through channels, completely unaware of the tension that still lingered in the kitchen. I did everything I could to act normal, but I could feel my stepson's gaze from across the room, watching me, waiting for something I wasn't ready to give. And then, just when I thought the worst was over, my husband's phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at it, his expression shifting in an instant. A look of quiet concern flickered across his face before he stood up and walked toward the hallway. Something wasn't right. I glanced at my stepson, who had noticed it too. His eyes followed my husband as he disappeared into his office, shutting the door behind him. A strange tension settled over me, one I couldn't place. Minutes passed. Then suddenly, my husband's voice cut through the quiet, sharp, and demanding. "What the hell is this?" I jumped, my heart pounding. My stepson's jaw tightened as we both exchanged glances before rushing toward the office. My husband was standing by his desk, holding his phone tightly, his face pale with anger. His eyes flicked up to meet mine, and in that moment, I knew. He had seen something that changed everything. My throat went dry as I stepped into the office. My husband stood rigid, his phone gripped so tightly his knuckles turned white. His eyes burned with something I hadn't seen before. Betrayal, anger, confusion. My stepson tensed beside me, his jaw clenched as if bracing for impact. "What is this?" my husband repeated, his voice colder this time. He turned the screen toward me, and my stomach dropped. A message thread, one I didn't recognize. The words blurred together as my pulse pounded in my ears, but the intent was clear. Someone had sent him screenshots of conversations that never happened, words exchanged between me and my stepson, twisted into something dangerous, something that painted a picture of secrets and lies. "This isn't real," I breathed, shaking my head. "I didn't—" My husband let out a bitter laugh, running a hand through his hair. "Are you seriously going to stand there and lie to me?" "I'm not lying!" My voice cracked under the weight of the accusation. I turned to my stepson, searching his face for some kind of explanation, but he looked just as stunned. "This isn't from me," my stepson said firmly. "Someone set this up," my husband scoffed. "And I'm supposed to believe that? Who else would be texting like this?" That's when it hit me. A sickening realization settled in my gut, cold and undeniable. Someone wanted to destroy this family. Someone wanted my husband to believe the worst. But who? And then my stepson stiffened beside me, his expression shifting from confusion to something more dangerous. "I think I know who did this," he muttered. Before I could ask, his phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, his face paling as he stared at the screen. Slowly, he turned the phone toward me. A single message. "Did you really think I wouldn't find out?" My heart stopped. The sender's name was all I needed to see. It wasn't a stranger. It wasn't some random mistake. It was my husband's best friend. A heavy silence filled the room as we all stared at the message. My husband's face twisted in confusion before realization set in. His best friend. The person he trusted for years. But why? My stepson exhaled sharply, his grip tightening around his phone. I had a feeling something was off. He's been watching too closely, asking too many questions. I swallowed hard, my mind racing back to every little interaction. The way my husband's friend always seemed to linger around, the way he'd make small, seemingly harmless comments about our family, about trust. I had brushed it off before, thinking nothing of it. But now, it all made sense. My husband looked between us, the anger in his eyes dimming, replaced by something else, doubt, regret. Why would he do this? He murmured, almost to himself. Because he wanted you to doubt us, my stepson said, and it almost worked. The weight of his words hung between us. My husband ran a hand over his face, looking exhausted, like the ground beneath him had just been pulled away. He exhaled, then walked toward his desk, dialing a number, his best friend's number. The phone rang once, twice, then voicemail. I could see the tension in my husband's shoulders as he placed the phone down. He wasn't just angry, he was hurt, betrayed by someone he considered family. I need to fix this, he finally said, turning toward me. His voice was quieter now, the fury gone. I should have believed you. A lump formed in my throat, but I only nodded. There were no easy answers, no perfect way to undo what had just happened. Trust had been shaken, but maybe, just maybe, we could rebuild. That night, the house felt different. He didn't say much, but the way he looked at me, the way he reached for my hand before bed, it was his silent way of saying sorry. As for my stepson, he didn't bring it up again. He simply met my eyes before heading to his room, a look of quiet understanding passing between us. The damage had been done, but in the end, the real betrayal hadn't come from within our family. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to start healing.